Hi everyone, my name's Steph Piper, and this is a recording of my Skill Trees talk, which I delivered at the 2023 Makerspace Symposium, which was held at UQ Innovate. I did record the talk on the day, but unfortunately the talk recording, the audio didn't save, which is a real shame. So I'm just re-recording it for you all now. Those of you who attended the conference would have been able to receive a beta testing copy of my Skill Trees book. And this talk explains what that's all about. So in this session anyway, I'll be talking through what are skill trees and how I've used gamification to build them up, how I've been able to use it as part of my makerspace work, and how this project, just like many things, has evolved so much bigger than I thought it would go. But before we get started, I will talk a bit about a little crowdfunding project I'm doing at the moment. So those of you who attended the symposium last year would have remembered that I did a workshop where you could actually try out my glow stitch LEDs, which are an LED strip made out of flexible circuit board that you can actually machine sew with a sewing machine. And so I ended up making this product because I got a little bit frustrated with how our current workflow with wearable tech is usually based around hand stitching with conductive thread. So those of you who have used the LilyPad range probably are very familiar with this process. And so what you can do with these is you can just stick them down with conductive fabric sticky tape and you can machine sew through the tabs. So I'm super excited about this. And as you can see, yesterday, my campaign hit its goal, which I am so delighted and relieved to see. But moving on, so what are skill trees? For anyone who is familiar with playing games, you probably recognize the term as a video game word. And essentially, what happens in a video game, for those of you who are unfamiliar, is as you play the game, you generate XP points or experience points. And you can flick to a skill tree screen or a menu, and you can actually jump in there and you can spend those points on perks. So some of these perks might look like things that are running 10% faster, or maybe cutting down a tree and receiving 20% more loot, something like that. And it usually looks like this map of interconnected nodes where you can unlock something at the start and then continue to unlock connected nodes from there. And when we talk about gamification, it's about using some of those mechanics that we see in games in non-game environments. So we're looking at stuff like badging and leaderboards, all that kind of stuff. And probably one of the best examples that I've seen of gamification in educational settings is the app Duolingo, which you can use to learn a new language. And it is got some very powerful incentivizations in there where it encourages you to, maintain a streak across a number of days to continue slowly learning a language, maintaining a leaderboard where you can add your friends and maybe try and beat them with their scores, all kinds of great stuff. And I sort of wanted to be able to try and solve some of the problems that I've been having at my university with gamification. And so I work in a library makerspace, and I often see all of our fantastic librarians putting together these awesome talks as part of our orientation week. So we have offerings like how to learn to use the library, how to go and make sure that you're not going to get in trouble with academic misconduct, all that kind of great stuff. And so a lot of people, often get overwhelmed with O Week and don't make priority to attend stuff that is non-compulsory. And so often you end up with students who might be in their second or third year and just don't realize what library services are available. And similarly, like within my library makerspace, there's so much great equipment and gear in there. And, if students were to spend some of their spare time working on projects, creating something that could be as part of a portfolio, they'd have a much higher chance to do well in a job interview or, really show off what their skills are. And so I really wanted to, use gamification to solve some of these problems. And I also wanted it to be off the computer and on paper. And this is a little solution that I came up with. So this is a printable template, and the idea is that there are a whole range of uh, tessellated hexagons. And so to use this sheet, what you can do is start right at the bottom. And as you do each thing on this list, you can color in a tile. And so you can easily visually see what your progress is and get inspired to try new things as well. So it starts down right at the bottom in a basics area, and then it progresses in a spectrum towards more advanced skills. And I did mention at the start that traditional video game skill trees are built up with interconnected nodes. And I did start off with that kind of template when I began this project, but to be honest, it doesn't quite reflect what real life looks like. So generally, when we learn something new, you might start right down the bottom with everyone else, but once you start to get a bit higher, you don't need to do things in order. You can skip around and try different things. And that's why I ended up going with a more of a spectrum kind of result rather than something that was too connected. And so I've been busy testing this concept as well. So that makerspace skill tree that we saw in the last slide there, I have been giving it to some of my makerspace staff members to try out, and it has been fantastic to see what their skill level is before they start. So that means that I can get an indication of how to spot train them in a time appropriate manner. And if there's downtime, they can actually go and choose things that they haven't done and complete them in a way that is interesting to them. So rather than me saying, okay, you haven't done this before, this is a project I think you should be doing, they can choose something that is personally exciting and relevant to, the way that they're interested in the world. So that's one of the things I really like about it. It's also been great to share online as well. So I've been making a few different variations of these in different skill area topics, and people love to send them back to me colored in, which is pretty fantastic to see. So even when I post half finished skill trees that have missing tiles and I put an accompanying text that says something like, does anyone have any ideas for the remaining tiles on this sheet? People still color them in and send them back to me, even though it's not finished, which is very cool to see. And probably one of my favorite skill trees that I received back from someone online was for the electronics skill tree. Someone colored in every single tile except for the let the magic smoke out tile, which I thought was a fantastic flex on their behalf. So yeah, they've just had so much great shareability online, which has been so lovely to see. And some of the unintended effects of these skill trees is that they've been a bit of a great equalizer in the way that you can actually sort of see what your real skill value is to some extent. So it means that if you are someone who suffers from something like imposter syndrome, where you don't quite feel confident in your abilities, it means you can visually see actually, yeah, I have done quite a lot of stuff. I am a bit of an expert actually. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, it also starts to banish a little bit of the overestimation of ability that we can sometimes see. So, for example, I did have an interaction with someone where they came in and tried to explain to me how to fix a 3D printer incorrectly. And I asked him, so do you have a 3D printer at home? And he said, no. And I said, have you ever done any 3D printing at all? And he said, no, actually. And as he slowly backed out the door, he continued to explain that as a mechatronics engineer, he tends to know these things intuitively. Um, and he soon walked away very quickly after that. Um, so anyway, it's been so fantastic to use them to really target your improvement areas with quite a little bit of a degree of accuracy, to be honest, and give yourself a good catalyst for improvement. So I've been filling in my own skill trees book here, and if you can sort of see up on the video feed here, that is my current skill levels across the areas. And what I've learnt from doing this is that if I want to level up in the electronics space, especially, I really need to start doing more analog circuit design. If I want to level up in the dev board space, which is your Arduino and Raspberry Pi, I need to stop doing so many Arduino projects and start doing some Raspberry Pi projects. And if I want to climb those final levels in the 3D printing skill tree, I really need to start doing some more resin printing. Um, so yeah, it's a bit of an eye opener, and it's been so great to see that because it's so easy to get stuck in your own ways and forget that there's always more to learn. You sort of you think about your own projects that you're doing, and it's very hard to see a top-down bird's eye view of where you're currently at. And all of these that I've made so far are all open source. And so you can sort of see as you run your eye down that little list that this project has gotten way out of hand. And I have been very excited to make a whole range of these across a huge range of interest areas. And all of these are licensed under the Creative Commons CC by NCSA license. And so if you would like to go and use these for any of your work, please feel free to do so. I'm currently at a stage where I am really trying to get as much feedback as I can on this concept. I really want to try and polish this as much as I can before it goes much further. And you'll notice in that license, there's an NC in there as well, which stands for non-commercial. And so I've done that just to make sure that someone doesn't beat me to making a book before I do. But yeah, I'm very much open to anyone trying these out and yeah, giving some feedback. And when I'm making a skill tree, some of the goals that I keep in mind with these is really keeping in mind that I need to make these really flexible. So what I am honing in on, which each one of these very simply worded tiles is the core skill, technique, tool, or software that really comes down to, something that you'll need to learn as part of that interest area. So rather than saying something like in the woodworking skill tree, for example, build a clock, you might break that down and say, okay, use a bandsaw, embed electronics in a project, and really make it something that is, very freeing for whatever kind of style project someone wants to do. So they're not locked down to doing something that's very specific, but very free to pursue their own interest areas while still ticking off goals. I also want to really make sure that if you can pick this up as an average person, you are able to complete it. So especially thinking not restricting the tiles with expensive tools or software or things that are hard to obtain outside of a professional space. Obviously, as you climb up higher in the skill trees, this becomes a bit harder to manage, but in the basics areas, if you just want to get started and try it out, I've definitely tried to keep this in mind as much as possible. And I've also been, very aware that everyone's journey is so different. And I've just tried to make all of these trees include stuff that is like a very broad spectrum of interpretation. So, for example, in the crochet skill tree, I've included a tile about crocheting with metal wire, which is something that people do. And the 3D modeling skill tree that's featured on this slide is probably my favorite one. So I got to sit down with an animations lecturer to make this, and he has got fantastic skills in stuff like sculpting and texturing and animation, whereas my skills in 3D modeling are very heavily around CAD modeling for engineering, thinking about prototyping and design for manufacture. And so when we sat down and we made this 3D modeling skill tree together, we were just learning so much from each other about our different skill areas and, realizing, wow, I didn't know you could do that. And if I actually sat down and followed through with all of his skill area tiles, I would probably become so much better well-rounded and be able to do such a higher caliber of project than I probably ever thought possible, which is really cool to see. My second favorite skill tree is probably the reading and writing skill tree, which I really like because obviously to become a good writer, you've got to start by doing a lot of reading and really understanding the material. And so in the reading and writing skill tree, you start with all reading goals, and then it's only when you get into the intermediate and advanced areas do you actually start to really get into the writing skills. And so for those of you who were at the conference, I was giving out a beta testing book, which includes 13 Makerspace specific skill trees. It also includes a whole bunch of self-reflection activities, gives you a progress dashboard so you can visually see where all of your skill levels are at, and you can then calculate your Makerspace XP score. And for those of you who are interested, my Makerspace XP score is 416. So every tile that you color in is 1 point. And I am probably easy to beat in that space because I haven't been able to get in and do any metalworking or CNC as yet, which are both skill trees that I've left empty. Some of the people that I was speaking to at the conference, one of them has Jess, if you're watching this, Jess's score is just over 600, which is absolutely fantastic. And of course, for those of you who have picked up a copy, the way to game the system and get more points is, of course, by filling in the set your own goal tiles, which count. Plus, there are some template skill trees in the back, which also count as well. And for any of you who try this book out and spend the time to have a good look and are able to give feedback, I'm giving out some prizes. So the person with the #1 score, if you're wondering, Jess did count herself out of the prize pool after that score. The person with the #1 score that gives feedback will receive a large pack of kits. And I'll also select 5 random people to receive glow stitch sample packs as well, which are pictured on the slide there. I'll also draw that in early January 2024, if you are interested in spending some proper time and having a look anyway. And this is all leading up to a much bigger version of the book, which is going to include a huge range of skills, around 60 skill trees across different areas. And you'll also have a massive progress dashboard to see your progress across all of those different areas, and a life XP score calculator, which is going to be very interesting to see. And so within that big book, those 60 skill trees are going to be split across 3 different areas. The first area is classic skills, which includes stuff like woodworking and metalworking, automotive, crafting, music and dance, reading and writing, crochet and knitting, sewing, jewelry making, and some house-specific goals like renovation and repair and house building. The next area is tech skills, starting off with computing, which is going to be aimed at people who maybe haven't got much computer experience at all, starting slow, and then moving into some of the more deep dive areas like laser cutting, dev boards, robotics, 3D printing, cybersecurity, website building, game design, and mobile app development. And finally, there'll be a life skills section as well, which will include stuff like cooking and baking, cleaning and gardening, animal care, travel, civics and community, language, healing nature, and self-care. So a huge range of skills. Plus, it's been delightful to see people finding my project online and sending me different skill trees for different areas. So someone sent me a roller derby skill tree, a Dungeons and Dragons skill tree, and a comic book artist skill tree as well. Plus, I've had someone send me a French translation of the laser cutting skill tree, which is very lovely. And for those of you who work in makerspaces, you can also find those makerspace skill trees as well, which include a variety of skill tiles. And I've got a variation in there for those of you who have a laser cutter and those of you who do not have a laser cutter. I've also been designing some posters as well based on these, which include 4 different skill areas under one large banner. So there's an electronics poster, to track a few different areas, and a digital fabrication poster as well. And this is all leading up to potentially a phone app as well, where instead of picking up a big hefty book and doing a lot of coloring in, you could simply download the app, and you might be able to tap on the tiles to color them in individually. And then it will go through and calculate that skill dashboard, that life XP score, any badges that you've unlocked, and show them for you automatically. You could also go and add your friends as well, and it would show stuff like maybe what kind of goals you've both set and what kind of scores you both have. And it might say, hey, look, you and your friend have both got cooking as one of your skill goal areas. Do you both want to get together and make a pizza from scratch on the weekend? So you can really start to plan skill leveling up together and really cultivate some new and exciting learning experiences, as something fun to do as a side project. So I'm really excited about this concept, and I'll be working with a phone app development company next year to make a demo version of the app too. But thank you so much for having a listen. If you're interested in following this project, please take a look at my GitHub page, which has all of those skill trees that I've made so far. I've also been hunting for skill area experts as well. So if you notice back on those earlier slides, there were areas that are ticked off and areas that are unticked. And so I'm currently hunting for experts across a whole range of areas to interview to make those skill area trees. And it probably takes about an hour to make a skill tree with someone. So it's a pretty fast process. Thank you so much for having a watch, and feel free to send me a message if you have any questions. Thanks.